There are no more excuses. Washington needs to find a way to bring in more reinforcements along the defensive line.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And just a quick reminder to all you videos out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming at all you everydayers on this Friday. I want to talk a little bit of basketball later on. Washington suffered another disappointing loss to a really good team at number 7 Nebraska. Now they have a chance to bounce back against Oregon. We'll get there a little bit later on. I also want to talk about this 2027 recruiting class a little bit with some coaches on the road. There have been some interesting offers that have been thrown out there, and I want to talk about what some of those might say about what's going on in this 2027 class and some different plans and things like that. But we'll talk about that after the most important thing that I know all you everydayers out there are very, very concerned about, interested in, whatever it is you want to say. That's the defensive line. Let's run through it real fast. So far in this transfer portal cycle, Washington has lost 4 defensive linemen in Javon Parker, Armand Parker, Dominic Macon, and Bryce Butler. They have brought in 4 defense, and that's without talking about the 6 guys who have graduated. They've brought in 4 defensive linemen, a trio of defensive tackles in Kai McClendon from Mississippi State, Deshaun Watts from Sacramento State, and Darren Conley from Ball State, along with Logan George from Ohio State. So you've gotten some solid reinforcements in there, but in order to succeed in the Big Ten, that is not nearly enough, because you look at what else is going on at that position right now. You've got Elinneus Davis coming back, who I think is someone who's got real breakout potential this year. He was someone who I probably should have mentioned on my breakout players for 2026 the other day, but he's someone who has just established himself with enough of a foothold that I think this coaching staff already believes in him. They know what they're going to get from him, things like that. Alongside him, the only other guys that really are expected to do anything in the rotation this coming season are sophomore Omar and incoming 4-star freshman Umu-Cais. Now, he is flanked by a couple of other incoming freshmen in Tom Malu and David Schwartzel, pair of 3-star guys, but both those guys are more long-term developmental kind of projects who I don't think we should expect anything from as true freshmen, or I don't believe this coaching staff does. So with that being said, there are 6 names there that I just threw out to you. The trio of defensive tackles from the transfer portal, Elinneus Davis, Omar Umu-Cais. Those 6 guys right now would be the entirety of Washington's defensive tackle rotation. That's not good enough. I think all those guys are very talented. I think all of those guys certainly have a place in this rotation, and none of this is to take anything away from those guys. Let me be very, very clear about that, because I think that everything that they bring to the table is so important and will be really valuable when you look at a guy like Deshaun Watts being the highest graded run defender by Pro Football Focus in either the FBS or FCS ranks this past season. You love to see that. I think Darren Conley is someone who can be a real leader in this room. I love what he brings to the table. I think Kai McClendon could be a very valuable nose tackle in this defense, especially with the experience he garnered as a true freshman at Mississippi State before tearing his ACL and missing the 2025 season. I love all that. However, that's just not good enough. When you look at some of these top tier pass rushes in the Big Ten and what they're able to bring, especially from the interior, it's more than that. And if Umu-Cais is someone who breaks out and, is able to give you a lot as a true freshman, like I believe this coaching staff might believe they can get from him, great. Of course you're happy with that, right? But you need as much depth as possible, because this is a position that will be ravaged by injuries traditionally throughout college football. And you need to plan for the best and prepare for the worst. So with that being said, I want to see this coaching staff go out and add at least 2 more bodies to this front. I think a couple of the outside linebackers that you have right now could wind up playing a little bit on the interior, whether it be a guy like Derek Coleman-Brusa or J.D. Hill, some of these other freshmen, but you need to go out and help them out as much as possible. I'm looking at a guy who just entered the transfer portal on Thursday, an Indiana defensive tackle, Hosea Wheeler, and I think he is perfect for what Washington is looking for. This is a guy who will have 1 year of eligibility remaining because of his time spent at Sacramento City College in 2021. He played 3 years at Western Kentucky and 1 in Indiana, so he should have an extra year with the NCAA's ruling on junior college players. And this is somebody who was very productive during his 1 season with the Hoosiers, won a national championship, has experience in the Big Ten, all those sorts of things that are really important. But when you look at it, 31 tackles this past season, 4 for loss, a pair of fumble recoveries. All of that is great. He played in all 16 games last season, made 5 starts for Curt Cignetti's team. So you look at all that and you think, okay, at 6'3", 298 pounds, this is a guy who can play that 4-eye position for you, can move around, give you a couple different things along Ryan Walters' defensive line, whether they do want to play a more traditional 4-man front like we saw most of the time last season, or if something we've been talking about on this show a lot comes to fruition and he wants to go back to that 5-man front where he was able to just really get after quarterbacks, whether it be Purdue, at Illinois, he did it at Missouri as well. If he wants to do more of that this coming season, you're going to need more depth. And I think that Hosea Wheeler is somebody who, being from the West Coast, being from Sacramento, there's certainly a solid path there for Washington to find a way to go out there and, make this connection, say, hey, yeah, it'd be a short flight for your family and all that to come see you play, all that sorts of stuff that goes into recruiting. And I think that, again, with 1 year of eligibility remaining, if you're selling him on, you can come in, you'd have a great path to being a starter in a defense where we're going to try to find different ways to maximize you, get you more of that production that you're looking for to go off to the NFL and everything like that, along with just adding more high-end experience, just more depth, more of everything that you're looking for at the position. I think that's great. And I think that's exactly what you're looking for. And again, it's something that shouldn't be overlooked that he has the Big Ten experience that you're looking for, because you look at Darren Conley, Deshaun Watts, both those guys are coming from lower levels. Conley, obviously at Ball State, being a group of 5 guy, and then Watts being an FCS player. I don't have anything against those guys, because if you can play, you can play. But I know there are people out there who have those questions about whether they're going to be able to withstand the physicality of a higher level. Personally, I think they absolutely can, because that's what this coaching staff is going out there and scouting and looking at in film and different things like that. But there are still going to be those questions, because we still haven't seen Omar Khan take a whole lot of snaps at the college level. Umu-Cais hasn't taken any snaps at the college level. I think he's a very advanced player and could certainly give you a lot and just help you with what you're looking for. But we haven't seen a lot of that just yet from 2 of the 3 players that I just talked about that are, Jedd Fisch and Jason Kaufusi, are planning on being a big part of this rotation. I think that Logan George, the edge rusher from Ohio State, could certainly help you out. He took a lot of snaps on the interior, just covering B gaps and things like that during his time at Idaho State, before his 1 season at Ohio State. So there are a lot of different avenues for Ryan Walters, Jason Kaufusi, Aaron Van Horn to find ways to get creative with this front 5, however many guys they want to line up on the line of scrimmage, but you still need more bodies. And another guy who I'm still just going to be monitoring very, very closely is Monmouth's Josiah Graham, who we talked about on yesterday's show, as you everydayers know, because this is a guy who, especially if you want to find more ways to integrate a Logan George or a Derek Coleman-Brusa, who's listed at 275 pounds right now. If you want to find ways to get those guys on the interior, which it certainly sounds like there are going to be plans, especially with Derek, as he continues to just grow and mature throughout his college career, to line him up more in there, like they did with Taitai Uyunglele this past season, I feel like that you're just going to go out and need to find more help, because this group could still absolutely use it. When you look at just the other questions that you have at edge behind Jacob Lane, where Hayden Moore and Devin Hyde certainly were able to give you some snaps this season. Russell Davies obviously missed the year. Isaiah Ward missed 5 games this past season with an injury. So if you're able to go out there and add somebody with any kind of production, that would certainly be very solid. And Josiah Graham having 9.5 sacks this past year at Monmouth, again, it's a lower level school, but if you can play and you think that you in Washington's player personnel department believe that all the numbers are there, all the athletic testing numbers, the strength, everything you're looking for shows up on film, great. Go out and add that guy to your room and just help continue to rotate the theme that we've had here on Locked On Huskies with these hockey lines. Excuse me, I'm getting so many H words here all mixed up. I think that's something that could really help out this front. And I'm very intrigued to see how it could all play out because Josiah Graham, being a true outside linebacker kind of guy who mainly lines up in the wide nine, is someone who could also just help this group out a lot. But you just need to find a way to add more reinforcements to this group. So switching gears here a little bit, let's talk about the 2027 class because plans for what Washington's next class might be, they seem to be changing on a daily basis. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're back in momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boost gives you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. You make your picks, then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. To all you everydayers out there, thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first watch or first listen of the day. And thank you again for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. It gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Huskies, and that's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. So wherever you listen to this, you can grab it. And you also get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of the show. You can talk about any other sports that you want to as well. You can hang out in there during games, chat with other Husky fans. I'll be in there too. I'll answer all your questions that you might have in there. And if you want to check that out, go to lockedonhuskies.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. And as we move right along here, I'm really intrigued about the plans for this 2027 class because I'm still sticking by exactly what I've called this for a while now, and that Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff are going big game hunting, where I want to start at tight end because we talked a little bit about running back and wide receiver on yesterday's show, as you everydayers know. So I'll circle back to those in a little bit because I look at this position and I was originally under the impression that Washington was only going to take one tight end, but with the amount of offers we've seen go out recently, I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Paopao wants to take two because I look at just the way this room is starting to fill up where you have 7 guys on scholarship at that position right now, which is why, I was talking about Vander Plug and what he might be able to bring to the room if he wanted to transfer back here from Oregon after being a one-time UW commit. Obviously, he's ended up at NC State since then. So it looks like Washington is going the Jedd Fisch route of trying to go after more high school players. So as I look at this position, there are 4 guys that are really standing out to me. We mentioned on the show the other day, Colt Lumpers, the 4-star tight end who's committed to Alabama. He's a name I'm going to be watching, but I wanted to mainly focus on some of the uncommitted guys right now, where I've split them into 2 categories, where there are some of these guys that I feel can be true 3-down tight ends right off the bat, and a couple guys who early on in their careers might really fill like one need or so, and then can really develop into more all-around players as their careers move forward. So in terms of guys who I think can be 3-down players early on in their career, or at least that's what the plan might be for this coaching staff, I'm looking at Zach Fairs, the 4-star prospect from Nevada, and 3-star Tommy Douglas from New Jersey, another recent offer thrown out by this coaching staff. And Tommy Douglas was kind of the guy that I would honestly say spurned this whole segment idea that I had, because I went and I watched his film and I was like, oh, this guy's a really smooth route runner off the line of scrimmage. And then you watch him block and it's, oh, wow, this guy's got a bit of a nasty streak as a blocker. I really like what he brings to the table in that regard. So I look at those 2 guys because I think that Zach Fairs is a very polished route runner and pass catcher at this point in his career. And Tommy Douglas, like I said, a very smooth athlete. So I don't think it would necessarily be a one or the other kind of take. I just wanted to lump those 2 guys together because I'm very interested to see what this is going to look like. And I feel like tight end perfectly encompasses some of the positions we're also going to mention when it comes to running back and wide receiver, and maybe even a couple others as you really dive into this class, whether it be linebacker, what that might look like, not defensive line. We know they just need tons of reinforcements there. Maybe offensive line too, where maybe Washington wants to wind up taking one extra body in the high school class instead of going the transfer portal route, but that's going to be a different discussion for a different day. Because I I look at the other side of this where Anthony Cartwright from Detroit and Zach Albright, the tight end from Glacier Peak here in Washington, both of those guys, they also are very good pass catchers. I think they're great athletes. Anthony Cartwright is someone who's just very physically developed already at 6'5", 230 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. He's someone who I really enjoy watching his film and going through his Twitter profile, because he highlights all the times that he's doubled and sometimes even triple covered, and he's still able to go up and win the ball, very strong at the catch point, different things like that. And I think of him a lot like, I know I've made this comparison before with some other tight ends, Tanner McLaughlin from Jedd Fisch's time in Arizona, where that's the kind of guy that Washington would like to line up in the slot a little bit and just have him move all around the formation and create different mismatches. And I feel the same way about Zach Albright. He's just not physically where Anthony Cartwright is right now. I think that Zach Albright is a very, very good athlete and has a whole lot of room to add weight to his frame, which could help him develop into a really nice H-back sort of tight end. But he's just not there right now, which is why I paired those two guys together, where it's, okay, Anthony Cartwright just isn't asked to block a whole lot because he's just so talented as a pass catcher. And I think that with Zach Albright, the Glacier Peak offense just likes to find different ways to get the ball into his hands, because he's such a talented athlete that they want to utilize that however they can. And as he, again, continues to add weight to his frame, refine his technique as a blocker, I feel like he'll find ways to develop in that sense. So I'm very intrigued to see what that was going to look like, because off the top, where remember Zach Fairs and Anthony Cartwright both visited for Washington's win over Purdue in November, I had a feeling that they were only going to wind up taking one player at the position, but maybe as they just kind of anticipate some extra turnover and some different things like that at the position, those things could change. So I really think that that's worth keeping an eye on. And I feel the same way about running back, because I know I talked about him on yesterday's show, as you everydayers know, Jeremy Adanju from Arizona. If Washington can find a way to pair him with one of these top backs thereafter, Noah Roberts would be my preference from just the film that I've been able to watch, with Elijah Kimball being a close second. I think that you're able to reload this room rather quickly, because adding these two guys, and I feel like a lot of this, again, like I was saying on yesterday's show, is spurned by the loss of Adam Muhammad, where if he doesn't enter the transfer portal, I think that Washington is still sitting here saying, all right, let's only take one back. Let's see what we can do here, because Adam would be a senior in 2027, and just the whole plan is different. But now without him, we're going to see Washington rely on Jordan Washington a lot more, and Brian Bonner, and maybe one of these other guys, whoever breaks through. As you everydayers know, on a show the other day, I talked about Quade Carr as one of my potential breakout candidates for spring and fall camp. So there are a lot of different ways that this position could end up winding up. I'm just of the mind that you can absolutely take a second back as long as one of the guys that you bring in is ready to play as a true freshman. I know there are a lot of people out there who are opposed to playing true freshmen in any way, shape, or form, but I feel like running back has been just historically one of the easiest positions to transition to, where some offenses might not ask you to pass block a whole lot early in their careers, and you can rotate different guys, and that is what it is. That's a different discussion. But I think that with somebody of Noah Roberts' caliber especially, there is going to be a place for him in Washington's offense as a true freshman, with just his size and speed and his vision, his ability to cut in between the tackles, and how he can work there. I'm very intrigued to see how this can all play out, because again, just with the theme of how this translates to the 2027 class, I feel like it's just going to be a little bit bigger now, with some of the guys we've seen Washington lose to the portal, and with how Jedd Fisch has attacked this portal cycle specifically, because we've seen them go after several guys that do have multiple years of eligibility remaining, but especially at a position like running back, where the plan was to go out and get Jaden Lamar. And Jedd Fisch said this a couple weeks ago during his press conference, where he said that, yeah, we wanted to get a guy with 1 year remaining, so, he could come in and help out some of these younger guys and pass protect and do some of the finer things that we don't expect from the younger guys in the system just yet. So I'm very curious to see how that might just change things moving forward, because I don't think that you're going to want to go out and add another transfer running back with what this room could look like going into next season. So if the coaching staff does want to find a way to take two from the high school ranks, because maybe they believe that one of these other guys might wind up transferring if they're not getting snaps, or maybe they're just, not developing at the rate that they hope they would, something like that, there are other ways for this roster to just really just even itself out through, I don't want to call it natural progression, but in the world of the transfer portal, that's really the best way to put it. And now before we move on here to some basketball talk, wide receiver. In this class, this is interesting to me because we already have seen Washington take one wide receiver in 4-star Braylon Pope, and I've been saying for a while that I believe that the Huskies are going to take two more. I would put one in the Z slot kind of mold. Zarek Sidney is the name I've been throwing out there a lot, the 4-star from Arizona. But the more I look at this other spot, I believe it's going to be reserved for another big, long outside guy in the same mold as Braylon Pope. And I don't know if that's Jedd Fisch necessarily changing up some things in his offense where he wants to just have more size on the field and can find ways to deploy two of those players at the same time, or he just wants to restock that room. But I'm very curious about that after, I know I mentioned this name on yesterday's show, an offer to 3-star Briceson Thrower Jr. out of Texas, where this is another guy, 6'3", 175 pounds, really, really good at the catch point. I'm curious to see how this is going to shake up because Washington is certainly well in the race for Tre Moore, who Kevin Cummings had an in-home visit with the other day. I really like Damani Warren out of Nevada. That's another guy who I think is very, very talented. And then we've seen Washington just try to get in the mix for Zion White at IMG Academy. There are a couple other guys that the Huskies have done a really, really good job getting their hats in the ring for. And there are so many different ways this could shape up. And with Jedd's motto of we're never going to be in a position to turn down talent, it just always feels like that's going to come from the high school ranks. So if things are just kind of shuffled around with what this class is going to be, don't be shocked because there are so many different ways that this roster, again, can play out where even looking beyond the 2026 season, since this coaching staff should always be preparing for just, 12, 18 months in advance. I like where things are going. I like where Washington sits with some of their top prospects and top targets in this class, but watching how that plays out over the next few months and who this coaching staff might go and visit is certainly going to be something to keep an eye on. But let's switch gears here once again, because on the basketball court, Washington has a great opportunity to bounce back on Sunday against Oregon. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Wednesday's loss to Nebraska was just so frustrating. That's a really good team. That is a very, very good team. And now Washington comes to the end of the toughest part of its schedule at 1-5, where you played, if you really want to just be serious about it, 5 teams in the top 10, because Michigan State was number 12. Now they're ranked inside the top 10. That's what Big Ten basketball is. And it's exhausting. It's frustrating. And it's very clear that Washington has the pieces to succeed. And Danny Sprinkle continues to talk about there are no moral victories, everything like that. And it's great to see improvement, but it's time to get over the hump. And I couldn't agree more. And it's so frustrating when these injuries continue to pile up, where Wesley Yates missed this last game, where it didn't even happen in a scrimmage. Danny Sprinkle said he rolled his ankle during Monday's practice during a non-contact rebound drill. So that's really frustrating. Sounds like he might be back in time for Sunday's game against Oregon. Sounds like Lathan Somerville might be trending towards playing on Sunday as well, according to what the Danny Sprinkle told the Big Ten Network crew. So that's a really good sign, especially when you look at this Oregon team that is really, really struggling, where they're 8-11. They're 1-7 in conference play. They're dealing with some of the same injury issues that Washington is. I don't think it's as severe, but I know Nate Biddle's been hurt for them. So they've had their own just string of issues. And I look at this game as one that Washington can really use to get right, where I don't mean that in terms of overlooking Oregon by any stretch of the imagination, because it's a rivalry game. Obviously, always anything can happen. But I just look at the string of opponents that Washington has played recently. I know Oregon's had some similar issues where they had to play Michigan and Michigan State after they came to Washington and everything like that. So it's not like they haven't had their own share of just struggles in terms of who they've had to face in the conference. But I just look at where Washington is and how things have continued to come together over this stretch. And I continue to look at just how they played for the majority of that Michigan game. And there were points in the Nebraska game where things looked competent. I don't know if that's necessarily the best gauge, but it would be the same thing against Michigan State. And those are just really well-coached teams with a whole bunch of talent that, especially this Nebraska game the other day, that shoot the lights out, they play great defense. But I think this Washington team, with all of the injuries they've suffered and everything else that we've seen come together this season, they are improving at a rate that would be exciting enough if we didn't see the schedule that we just did. And you wouldn't look at this and say, well, hold on, they're 2-6 in conference play and everything else. And yeah, that's all extremely frustrating. And that is still the reality of the situation. So you can't necessarily eliminate that from the equation, but you look at how Zoom Diallo has played over the last couple of weeks, how Hannah Steinbach has played all season long, averaging a double-double this season. He's been tremendous. Washington has the high-end stars to make it happen. I look at what Cortland Mulder did against Nebraska. I was so impressed. He played 26 minutes, and I know I talked about him last week, as some of you everydayers know, as a potential X factor with the injuries to Josiah Rencher, and then obviously with Desmond Claude stepping aside, we got to see more of him now that Wesley Yates was out of the rotation as well. And with the energy and just competitive spirit that he brings on the defensive end of the floor, I think he's someone who can be a real spark plug. Now it's just all about, trying to hone in some of his shot selection, which Danny Sprinkle talked about after the game, saying, I'm not necessarily going to hone him in too much and try to take away the swagger that he plays with, but 1-on-4 transition threes are not going to win basketball games. So I think that there are some things that as a true freshman like that continues to grow and mature that he will figure out. And he's just going to be another really exciting piece as JJ Mandequit continues to get better. I've been really encouraged with what we've seen from Bryson Tucker. I think Frank Kepnong is somebody who has just continued to be a really effective piece of this roster throughout the season. And as the schedule just starts to get a little bit easier, I would say, because I don't think there's anything that can compare to what Washington just went through, there are going to be some major opportunities to get some wins where it's tough that right after this game, you got to go to Illinois on Thursday. They're ranked number 11 in the country. So that's going to be another really tough one. And then Iowa comes to town not too long after that. That's another really good, well-coached team. And then UCLA as well. You got to go down there. But again, comparing that to the stretch that Washington just went through and looking at how the Huskies played UCLA last time and everything, if you can get a win in this game against Oregon, I feel like that's just going to be the momentum that this team needs to really get things moving in the right direction, because there are still things that need to get worked out. Kimari Peterson's struggles against Nebraska were extremely disappointing. He goes 0 for 8 from the field, 0 for 6 from three-point range. Those are things that cannot happen. But as this team continues to gel and come together, I think that there are there are going to be, not several opportunities, there are going to be plenty of games that are very, very winnable for this team. And I think that with the way that Washington showed it can compete against some of the top teams in the country, against Ohio State in that really tough game that you were able to win, I think it showed that this team can take that step forward. And it's frustrating that we didn't see it come to fruition against some of the best teams in the conference, against Indiana. But that doesn't mean that this season is over and lost. I think that if we get to the end of February and they've only won 2 of the next, whatever it is, 5, 6, 7 games, then there are going to be some major conversations that need to be had. But at this point in time, there is still plenty of time to turn the season around and get things moving in the right direction. And again, going back to some of these guys that you have at the top, in a Hannah Steinbach, in a Zoom Diallo, with guys like that are leading the charge, I just feel very good about where this team can continue to go through the back half of Big Ten conference play, because it should be I don't want to say an easy challenge by any stretch, just knowing what the Big Ten has been like to Washington through its first year plus in the conference. But when I look at this team, I see everything that is needed in terms of a talent perspective to get over the hump. And I'm very curious to see how Danny Sprinkle wants to continue working in Nikola Zapina as Big Ten play continues, where it's very clear that there are just still things he needs to learn, and that's okay. He got here mid-season. He shouldn't be expected after a little over a month, as I record this on January 22nd, to completely know the playbook, completely understand it. And that's one of those things where as he continues to grow and mature and just figure out everything that needs to happen at the college level to succeed in this particular system, I think that he is someone who could still be a really important piece for this team. So I'm curious to see how Washington wants to work with that. And if you're able to add Lathan Somerville back by this Sunday, all of a sudden your rotation in the front court gets a lot deeper with Jacob Ognacevic, who's back in the fold now. All of that is great. And again, it's just all about continuing to have things move in the right direction. And with so much time remaining, I still feel very good about where this season could end up because of the talent on the roster. And because I heard Tom Izzo talk about it last week, saying that he believes that Danny Sprinkle is a really great coach who's had a whole lot of success. And it takes time to integrate a culture, and it takes time to just set a program and do all those different things. And when you have to do it with a roster where you weren't familiar with anybody outside of Great Osborne in your first season, and then you bring back 2 players in year 2 and Frank Kepnang and Zoom Diallo, that's a very, very difficult thing to do, even in the transfer portal era, and that those things do take time. And that's why I'm willing to be patient with all this, when not just hearing that from a guy like Tom Izzo, but when you look at how this roster has come about, the talent that Danny has shown he can recruit to Washington, I feel very good about where things might be heading. So it's just a matter of finding a way to get over the hump and win some more of those tough games like you did against Ohio State and just get that ball rolling. And I feel like that can absolutely happen this Sunday against Oregon. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you like what we have to offer here on Locked On Huskies, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on Monday.